food-based cohort in the spring, next spring, so we're excited for that. Definitely encourage everybody to come next month as well, February 8th. Our topic is telling your food stories to the media. We're going to have a panel of folks from the Daily Star, from Tucson Foodie, from other media outlets talking about if you are a food-based business, how to get your story told. What are media folks looking for? So I encourage folks to come out for that. We have more information on our programs. Feel free to grab that on the way out. And I would like to turn it over to Jonathan, the Executive Director for the Tucson City of Gastronomy.
Good morning. Great to see this turnout. Hi to all my friends on the panel. Good to see you. And they represent several of our City of Gastronomy certified businesses. And you can learn more about that by checking out our website. And this has been a great collaboration with U of A Forge. And today's topic is near and dear to my heart and palate. So I'm not going to talk any longer, but just wanted to say welcome. Please check out the upcoming sessions in this series. And yeah, enjoy. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Hi, good morning all. You've probably seen my face all over Instagram. My name is Arielle De Soucey. I am the wine director for Tap and Bottle North and Westbound. I'm really honored to be asked to moderate this panel of these three amazing women in wine. I feel like there's needs to be more emphasis on locally made wine, supporting locally made businesses, and this is the way to do it from the ground up by building this community. So thank you to Jonathan for inviting me for moderating this panel. The topic is business of heritage foods, and wine falls into this category. There are grapes grown in southern Arizona, and that's what we're going to focus on today, how we can collaborate more and really draw an emphasis to promoting the locally made wines within our state to drive that economic impact. A little bit about me. I'm not from Tucson, I'm not from Arizona, I'm from New York. I have a few wine certifications as a certified specialist of wine, and I hold my WSET 3 certified. I've lived all over the world. I've worked in all parts of the wine trade. Most recently, I was living in the Czech Republic, where I launched my business, Civil Wines. This is my Instagram handle and also my website. So I have worked in restaurants, food, import, export. I've done judging competitions. I have represented the Czech Republic on a national stage. When I moved here to Arizona, I think the first thing that shocked me was the quality of the wine. It was not like any other wine I've tried before. There were similarities in terms of Spain and France and some of the varieties, but Arizona wine has its own unique identity. And I think this is really, I really want to drive home today. I'm so excited to have this panel of speakers today. We're really lucky. So I'd like to introduce Jeanne of Arizona Wine Collective. She is the co-owner. Arizona Wine Collective is the mecca for Arizona wine in Tucson. If you have never had an Arizona wine, go to Arizona Wine Collective. They offer flights and wines by the glass and bottles for sale and in-house tastings. Lots of opportunities to try a huge breadth of Arizona wine. Sarah, co-owner of San Reckoner Winery, winery in Wilcox. Sarah runs the tasting room, which is here in Tucson. So if you don't feel like going to Wilcox or Elgin or Sonoyta, you can go right into San Reckoner's tasting room. It's around the corner from Tap and Bottle, where you can taste locally made wine. Sally Kane of Coronet Restaurants and Nightjar. Sally is a well-established restaurateur here in Tucson. She and Sarah have worked on collaborations that are exclusive to Coronet, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But these are three very powerful women in the wine industry in Arizona. So I'm really honored to be amongst them today. Now, to set the stage, we actually have someone from Canada here today. So surprisingly, not everyone's from Tucson in this community. So much like me, some transplants. I want to set the stage because I think Arizona wine needs to be identified in its own right. So this discussion that we're going to talk about today, going to cover a few brief topics. The terroir and grape varieties, as I mentioned, similarities to other parts of the world, but different in its own right. a brief history of Arizona wine, and a look at the economic impact, because this is the business of heritage foods after all. Next, the versatility of Arizona wine in restaurants and tasting rooms. Going into the diversity of Arizona wine. I think you'll be surprised to see how many varieties are actually planted in Arizona. And then looking ahead at the future. Things like this may not have existed 10 years ago, but now here we are, all interested in Arizona wine, and this is only going to be pushed forward. Now, Arizona, you can think about it as 3 American viticultural areas, right? 1984, the first one was established in Sonoita. Sonoita Elgin, here in the southern part of the state. It covers Pima County and Santa Cruz County. Next up, a little bit farther east, is Wilcox. Wilcox is the majority of the wine production. You're looking at about 70% of the grapes produced are in the Wilcox AVA. This is actually where San Reckoner has much of their vineyard sourcing operations. In the north, the most recent addition to the AVA is the Verde Valley AVA. In my opinion, some of the most exciting wines are really coming from here. Super high elevation, really experimental plantings, and really interesting grape varieties. Now, overall, there's about just over 1,600 acres planted in Arizona. You know, Arizona used to be a lot of cattle ranching, still is. Some of this land is being transformed into vineyards, some of it's still cattle ranching. So there's a big diversity. If you ever take that drive down to Wilcox, you'll see a cattle ranching operation on one side of the road and some vineyards on the other side of the road. So it's a kind of a melting pot now. And AVA, I should have mentioned that earlier, this is an American viticultural area. Just for example, there's about 220 to 230 AVAs in California alone. So California really holds a lot of AVAs, these distinguishable, identifiable areas for growing grapes. We have 3. So not as much on a scale of California or Oregon, but 3 is small but mighty. A little bit about the history. Grapes have been planted here a long time. Father Kino planted grapes in 1703 for sacramental wine using a grape called Pais or Mission. About 250 years or so, Dr. Gordon Dutt was a soil scientist. He was commissioned by the University of Arizona to create these soil testing sites in southern Arizona, specifically to see how we could mitigate water. This was not an venture into viticulture and to make a winery. He was really brought out here to identify those areas where water could be measured and saved because of the risks we see today with climate change. So in the 1970s, he moved to Elgin. There was a ranch called the Baba Kumari Ranch. He planted some grapes. It turned out these grapes produced pretty good wine. He invited a judging panel in. They tasted these wines, and they were really blown away at the quality of these wines. In 1984, he started Sonoita Winery, still owned and operated by the family today. His granddaughter Lori is now the winemaker there. In 1982, a big thing happened, which was the Domestic Farm Winery Bill. And I bring this up because the politics of wine always kind of intercedes with how we want to sell things in the market. So this allowed wineries to sell directly to consumers. This was a really important step to create that bridge between the consumer and the winery direct. In 1984, as I mentioned, Dr. Gordon Dutt opened Sonoita Winery. In the 1990s, Kent Callaghan quickly followed suit. He planted vines in Elgin. His vines are some of the oldest Mourvedre vines in the state. He's president of the AWGA now. He's a fantastic winemaker, and he mentors many people in the industry. He planted these vines in the Buena Suerte vineyard, and these wines were served at the White House within a few years of being bottled, which is really impressive for Arizona. A quick statistic, which I think is interesting. In 2005, there were 16 wineries in Arizona. Now we're looking at over 140. That's a tremendous growth of over 160%. When I moved here, so I came from a world of rain and humidity and cold weather and marginal summers. They are extreme here. We're looking at huge diurnal temperatures, really interesting soil types, volcanic soil to sandstone to limestone. Arizona has its own unique microclimate. So here, we're looking at a thing called terroir. This is kind of the all-encompassing term for soil and wind and aspect and where the grapes are planted and the nutrients in the soil. All of this comes into play when we're talking about Arizona. And the grape varieties that are planted. There's over 50 varieties planted in Arizona. There's still a lot of experimentation happening. There are a lot of Southern Italian varieties. There are Central European varieties, Romanian varieties being planted. It's such an incredible kind of land of experimentation, and this is the Wild West. This is to see what we can do and how we can push those limits. I think it's a really exciting time to be here in this wine industry, this really burgeoning wine industry. You probably see a lot of grape varieties you've noticed, some you may not notice, or some you may have not been familiar with before. But all of this kind of sets your stage into thinking Arizona wine is not just Cabernet and Sauvignon Blanc. You can find and discover new varieties that might be very different from what you've had in the past, but familiar at the same time. And lastly, I want to talk about the snapshot because, again, this is the business of heritage foods. This is talking about how we can impact business with Arizona wine, promoting it in the industry. So, as I mentioned, that 160% growth, that is enormous. The Arizona tourism boards are now looking to promote Arizona wine on a much bigger scale. This is really great news for us who work in the wine industry. By 2019, we were looking at 1 million bottles produced in the state. That number may seem very big, but let me put it into perspective. If you've ever seen Justin wine in the supermarket, they make 1 million bottles just of that wine. So here in Arizona, you're looking at 1 million bottles overall. This is still a small industry with tremendous potential and growth, but I did want to make that comparison so that we can have that contrast. In terms of statewide support, we're looking at over 1,000 jobs that are created in the wine industry. That includes seasonal harvest workers, tasting room workers, full-time employees at the winery, people doing marketing for wine. This includes the whole kind of industry holistically. 114 unique wine labels in Arizona and 125 bonded winemaking locations. There are some producers you'll see who make wines at different locations, or maybe one person makes wine for 4 different wineries. So this is, again, a huge spirit of collaboration, which is why we're all here today, to talk about how we can impact and collaboratively lift up and create more of a buzz about Arizona wine. Now, the versatility of Arizona wine in restaurants and tasting rooms, I'm going to start off today with Sarah from Sandreckoner, because she runs this tasting room in Tucson, and she has kind of a knack for, pouring great wine and telling people and educating people about it. So as I mentioned, Sandreckoner Tasting Room is right in Tucson. If you see me at Tap and Bottle, all you have to do is walk about 5 minutes around the corner, and you can taste some beautiful wine right at the winery, or excuse me, at the tasting room. So I have some questions for you, Sarah.
Okay.
I put them up here because I don't know. Sometimes it's difficult to hear me speak, or if I don't enunciate properly. So tell me about Sandreckoner, Sarah. When did you open it?
Yes. Sandreckoner started in 2010. So my business partner, Rob Hamelman, who's the winemaker, he and I landed in Arizona in 2008 after working in California, France, and Colorado. And he trained, he got his degree in enology, his master's degree in enology at the University of Adelaide. So after working in all those regions, his very first wine job was in Sonoyta, actually under Kent Callaghan. So he has mentored many in the industry, and Rob was drawn strongly back to Arizona, and we bought our property in 2010. So our first wines were released in 2011. We had bought an existing property. It had 3 acres on it. So we closed in June of that year, took our first harvest in August. So we kind of hit the ground running. And we opened our tasting room here in Tucson. It's just half a mile on the other side of the railroad tracks from here in 2017. So we've been open for almost 6 years now.
Wow.
Or 7 years. Oh, God. Oh no.
I know it's 2024. I know.
7 years.
So you're one of the only Arizona wineries that have a tasting room in Tucson. Why did you make that decision to have it here and not in Southern Arizona?
Yeah, so when we bought the property in 2010, we moved there as well. So Rob and I lived out on the vineyard property, and it's very remote. Where the vineyards are is it's rural. You know, you can see your next neighbors. You don't and run into people at the grocery store once a week. You know, sort of thing. And we knew we were going to have to invest. So either we were investing in our winery to build out a tasting room, or we would be investing in building out a space here in Tucson. And we decided Tucson really because, there were 2 reasons. One, our children were getting to be elementary school aged, and we wanted them to go to school in Tucson. And the second being that we really were inspired by a lot of the businesses in Tucson. The community here was very strong. There's a lot of small family businesses that were making it happen and doing that, and we really love the entrepreneurial spirit here. So having neighbors like Tap and Bottle, EXO, and then as our neighborhood has built out with Anello and Crooked Tooth and Royal Room has been really, really cool.
Yeah, it's been really fun. Sarah and I have done some wine things together between San Reckoner and Tap and Bottle, which has been really great. So, this question is a big question, but how do you feel that the tasting room has impacted the community? Like, do you find people more curious about Arizona wine coming into taste?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, that was always the goal. When we first started, when we made our decision to have it be Tucson, we met a lot of pushback saying, well, Tucson's a beer town. What are you thinking? Like, people aren't going to come to you for wine. It's a beer town. I was like, well, I think it's changing. We had at that point we had our distributor based out of Phoenix, and we're starting to see the shift in local restaurants, everybody starting to see more accounts getting picked up in Tucson. And we really strongly felt that, Tucson is the gateway, or is the main hub for viticulture in Southern Arizona. We wanted to make it the place where people can, or contribute to making it the place, because I think Wine Collective, we opened up
in 18.
in 18.
Yeah.
So very similar times.
Yeah. We were told we were crazy too.
Yeah. So that this is where wine in Arizona lives for majority of the part. Being that all the viticulture, majority of the viticulture is grown in the 2 AVAs, the southern AVAs. Like, let's make Tucson the gateway for this experience, and if we're here, then we can contribute to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I moved here in 21, and so for me, everything was already here. I just started tasting, so it's amazing to hear that backstory and the growth. Talk a little bit about San Reckoner.
Sure.
People may not have tasted your wine before. How many wine labels do you produce? What's your production look like?
Sure.
Scales? Like
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, so everything that San Reckoner does, we are 100% Cochise County. So we work with 3 to 4 family-owned vineyards there, purchase the fruit. Majority of the fruit is within the Wilcox AVA. We do have some smaller vineyards outside of the AVA that we work with as well. But everything is coming from Cochise County. Our winery is in Wilcox still. And our annual production is about 2,000 cases. So if you're looking at the world of wine. If you're looking at what is considered a boutique wine, we are like micro boutique. We are it is a small production, hands-on everything type of situation. We produce the wines that you will see most outside of our tasting room. We make 3 wines: a red, white, and rosé. And then in our tasting room, we feature all of the smaller production stuff that we do. So it's usually single vineyard, single varietal. So everything from Sangiovese, which is my favorite, to Fiano, Vermentino for whites. We are really excited about Tannat for reds. So again, those varietals that aren't super... they're not well known domestically, don't grow a lot in the United States, but one of the other reasons we were drawn to Arizona is you can experiment and do anything that you want. We are not defined by a market yet or by the government like you are in Italy and France, for example. And our philosophy in the winery is kind of just let the wine sing. We are very low tech. Just about like 2 years ago, started using a forklift even in the winery. It's we foot stomp all of the whites and rosés still. It's the gentlest way to extract for whites and rosés. Everything goes into a 1.5 ton wooden basket press. That is, everything is very gentle. Rob has an incredible hand with wine, a way of knowing, almost intuiting what the wines need, and everything is attended to when it's needed. We don't have like racking programs or anything like that. It's really just kind of see what the wine wants to do, where it's going to be. He's really a shepherd to get it to where it's going to go, because terroir is the overarching drive for everything. It is such a unique growing region. We have the mountains on the east and the west sides. So we have this beautiful soil that, over the eons has come down. Chiricahuas on the east side are volcanic. So we have the volcanic rock and the granite, and then more sandstone on the western side. And then we were a seabed many, many, many years ago. And so about 3 feet down, you start hitting more limestone to the soil. So it's just this incredibly gorgeous soil. And at our elevation, a lot less, a lot cooler. So yeah, we really we want the terroir to shine. So sorry, very long-winded answer to that.
No, that's great. I mean, I think what I've noticed in your wines is the freshness of the wines and the acidity in the wines. Everything tastes like fresh fruit with great acid and balance. And that's what I appreciate most out of your wines. I'm going to be jumping back and forth a little bit. Next up, I want to talk to Sally. I have 3 questions I'm going to pose to the panel, but I'd like to do those at the end, and then we can kind of get into a Q&A. Sally of the Coronet. Sally has, well, I'll let Sally talk about the Coronet. Welcome, Sally.
Hi.
Tell us about your restaurants and history here in Tucson.
Oh, that's such a broad question. Well, I'll try to encapsulate it. So the Coronet's been around. This is our 10th year. We have an anniversary in April. It's absolutely just me making a restaurant. What do I want to eat? What do I want to drink? I feel like in the very beginning, especially funny enough with wine distributors trying to push me into selling what they thought the public wanted. And I absolutely love food and beverage, and I just wanted to create a place that's driven by love and cooperative creativity between me and my chefs. So the Coronet's beautiful. It always it's always important that we're in a kind of historic building. We were lucky enough to land at the Cushing Street space about 5 years ago. I always want the surroundings to create a sense of timelessness so people can be present with themselves and with what's at table. So that's a kind of brief synopsis of the Coronet.
And so there's the Coronet Cafe, and Nightjar.
Yes,
Is that
we have
correct?
3 entities in this one ginormous compound, I guess. And it's because the compound demands that, because this property has these kind of, this center courtyard with buildings all around it, and to weave cohesiveness through it takes a little bit of effort. So these 3 entities have come up, and oddly enough, the pandemic, where there was a moment of nothingness on property, let us see what the spaces could be. So there's 3 entities there now. So the cafe is day and night now, 7 days a week. The small craft cocktail bar is 7 nights a week, and then the fine dining restaurant's 5 days a week. So, and speaking to Arizona wine, and we haven't touched on it yet, but I know we're going to. There's because of you've heard and I think can understand about the restraints on production in the state, and it's like any commodity or widget. The less demand there is, the higher the price is. So for now, our Arizona wines are in the fine dining restaurant. It's harder to put them into a lower price point situation because you won't move them. And we can talk more about that later, but
Yeah, that is something
that's
I'm
where
gonna
they
touch on.
live. That's where they live. They live in the fine dining restaurant
Yeah.
for now.
Well, speaking of your wine and the fine dining restaurant, you and Sarah have collaborated with San Reckoner.
We have a
on
beautiful
wine.
collaboration.
So talk about it. I'd love to hear about that.
Yeah, and I should have
wine.
brought a bottle because I know.
I might have added a photo to the slide. Oh, I didn't.
Okay, the bottle's so freaking cute. So it's a collaboration between us, and it's also visually collaborative on the bottle. So the first time we collaborated, we did a blend, and that was really, really fun to be able to have some participation in alchemy was really exciting for me. This time we just tasted single vineyard varietals, and the San Reckoner produces incredible juice in these bottles. So figuring out which way we wanted to go, but I fell in love kind of immediately with the 2018 Sangiovese. There were 2 barrels, and I was able to purchase both of them and claim them as my own. So you won't find that Sangiovese anywhere else except at the tasting room and at the Coronet. And despite what I said a minute ago about sales, we are able to open this by the glass, and we kind of cruise through it, and it's so delicious. We also have a little kind of corner on our menu. It's the San Reckoner corner, so we also have the Vermentino, we have the Fiano, which is operatic, and we have the Carmenere.
That's a great adjective.
Yeah, no, it's, a tear to the eye, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. What was the question?
I'm going to the Coronet for lunch and having some piano. So what has been your motivation to do this collaboration with
San Reckoner, it just bowls me over every single time. I want in on the game, right? I think that's the biggest part, is that it makes me want to stand next to San Reckoner and to proudly pour it. And then actually you can come for lunch in the cafe, because we do have Arizona wines by the bottle, just not by the glass in those other entities. So you can get it all over property. But the easiest way to sell something, like there's a disconnect, right? We were talking earlier, people are like, is the wine any good? Well, the wine is amazing, but to get it in someone's mouth, you need to be able to pour it for them. So selling a bottle is much harder than getting a sip into someone's mouth. And once you do, the doors fly wide open, and yeah, junkies, every last one of them.
Yeah. That kind of leads into my next question. The Coronet is just so well known in Tucson, but do you find people coming from Tucson to have Arizona wine with their food? Do you find people from out of town more curious? What kind of demographics are you facing?
I really think it's both. I think it's because we now have something by the glass, it's easier to get it into everyone's mouth, but I think the barrier would exist within town. There's a greater curiosity perhaps for someone traveling, I think, a little bit.
Yeah.
But I think that's the way with travelers. I mean, when we travel, we're more curious, right? And then when we're at home, we are in our rut and we move around our little ecosystem. So yeah, probably we get to excite people traveling more, but our goal, at least with this one that we have by the glass, and we actually open others by the glass occasionally, it's just not every day, it lets us reach a greater audience.
Yeah. Have you ever done a particular dish with any of these wines, or a pairing?
We do pairings on and off. I mean, there's the Sangiovese we have right now speaks to, I mean, drinking it alone is great, but, you know, we have a slow-cooked wild boar right now with a local pasta from Ceres, their bucatini. So the Sangiovese speaks to that. But Sangiovese, it's, to me, and please, because, you know, for me, it's a lighter varietal, but it can handle a lot. So it can go from here to here on the palate, and it's friendly to many things on the menu.
Yeah, I mean, to Sally's point being, Arizona wine can be friendly with food. They have acidity, they have freshness, and a different fruity character that's not found in Italian Sangiovese.
It's
apples and oranges.
You know, anyone who knows me well knows I say this a lot, but for me, the wines on my list, whether they're from Arizona or they're from other places in the world, I really like something that struggles a little bit, whether it's a human or a grape. The more we struggle, the more our character becomes defined, and there's something unique and special to that struggle. It's when you have all the water and all the sun, and you look at, I mean, you know, like you look at a California wine, I'm going to seem a little rude, but there can be something gratuitous in that. Arizona wine is not that way. There is this elegant structure that moves me when I drink it. It is harder to come to because it took more to get it in that bottle. Not just the varietal itself or the terroir or the weather, but the people making it. So there's a struggle every step of the way, and something beautiful happens.
Yeah, and the politics and the sociological pressure around it as well. Like you were saying, it's a beer town.
Yeah.
People weren't giving you the chance. It's a beer town. Putting that pressure on the community to say, hey, we make wine, we're going to have it in a restaurant, and we're going to serve it by the glass. I think that's defiant. I think that's great. I mean, that's...
It also serves me because it's delicious.
Yeah. So now let's go to Coronet. No. Jeanne, I think you and I share the most common similarities in this discussion today. Jeanne is co-owner of the Arizona Wine Collective. This is one of the first places I went to in Tucson when we got here. My husband Jim and I said, we gotta taste Arizona wine. And it was just an incredible experience. So I'm really excited to have Jeanne here today. Tell us about Arizona Wine Collective, why you decided to focus on selling only Arizona wine. Like Sarah was saying, people thought you might have been crazy doing it. So tell us a little bit about that.
So we have been in business for 6 years. We'll celebrate our 6-year anniversary in February. And this was a crazy idea that my husband and I came up with, that we, and really, I mean, just to give you just a little bit of background, our whole career has been in marketing. So we started out in marketing technology in corporations, and then on our own, we had our own agency. That's just kind of what we do, is we're marketers. We opened a running store. We kind of then started following our hobbies, and it was like, if I'm going to market something, I want to care about it. So we opened the Fleet Feet stores here in town, and we're about marketing, not professional runners. We're here to help other people run. And then we sold that and said, we've got to do something else. We're not ready to be done. And we loved wine. Wine tasting was, and still is, a huge hobby that we share, I guess you could call it. And so we had a little time finally, and we started tasting Arizona wine. And Pete spent some time working in a tasting room. And the number one question is, where can I buy this in Tucson? Well, you can't. And so then we said, well, how about if we get a bunch of wineries, get wine from a bunch of wineries, and we let people taste it? Because I don't know about you, but when I go to the grocery store and I look at all the wines, I'm like, I don't know. I just don't know. I don't know if I want to spend $30 on that. It says it's got points and this and that, but I don't know if I'm going to like it. You really can't embrace wine until you taste it. And you're really not going to embrace Arizona wine because you don't even know what the heck it is. You know, you're looking at the bottle and it says Mourvedre. I can't even pronounce it. I think I'm going for the cab. So we really believed that people had to taste it. They had to be able to experience it. They had to be able to enjoy it all year round. And that's really what our whole goal was when we opened it. So yeah, I mean, we had a tough time through pandemic. Unfortunately, we were closed 7 months of that year. Other people were able to be open and we were not, which was very frustrating, but luckily people really bought a lot of bottles. So, and we chose to deliver them anywhere in Tucson.
Wow.
And so that was what we spent our time doing, and our place, and we paid rent to have a really big bottle shop that we would go and pilfer and deliver. But we got through that, and it's just been super exciting in seeing how many new wineries have come on board. I mean, and the wine is amazing. And so we have, just to give you an example, this is our current bottle list. You can always see it on our website. That's the reds. Whites and rosés are on this side. So we carry anywhere from 60 to 70 different labels at any one time. And so then every day we create a list that kind of represents different wineries and different wines. And we change it every day. And people who live here locally, every time they come in, they're like, oh, what's new? What can I try? And it's fun. It's exciting. I mean, we're all in on this. So we know what are the challenges with Arizona wine in a lot of ways, and we also know how successful it can be. So that's kind of our story there.
Yeah.
Did I answer a lot of questions?
Yeah, actually, so you kind of hit the both. I always think it's really fun when, for example, I host a wine club at Tap and Bottle, and there were these two gentlemen from Texas, and I love them. They told me they don't like Arizona white wine. They just don't like it. They've never had one they liked. So you know what I did? I went behind the bar and I poured them a little splash of Los Millets White, and they said, this is great. And they bought 3 bottles. What kind of reactions do you get from people like that are there's a lot of pushback, there's a lot of hesitancy, I've had one, I didn't like it. How do you navigate that?
Well, that's why we have tastings. It's like you really can't possibly say you don't like it unless you've tasted it. I mean, the truth is you can go to Rhode Island probably and taste some wine, and it's going to probably be good, but it might not be. But you have to taste it. You won't know until you do it. So yeah, we have a lot of people come in, and one of the first questions they'll see is like, oh wow, this is all Arizona wine.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, we didn't want to hide it when we came up with a name, but it's pretty. But and then they'll be like, is it grown here in Arizona? It's like they can't really even get and these are not just people from out of state. Mm-hmm. These are Arizonans. They do not, they can't fathom the idea that it's grown here. All these, and I said, oh gosh, this doesn't even scratch the surface of the wines that are in Arizona, right? We have about 20 wineries right now that we get wine from. Clearly, there's a lot more out there. But then again, we have, they need to taste it. And so I'm just like, I think you should pick the thing on here that you've never heard of and taste that, because that's what it's all about. Well, I just really only drink Chardonnay. Okay, let's try the peak pool. Let's see what you think of that one. And they're like, oh, wow, I've never heard of this before. This is great. So we just there's a lot of surprise. There's a lot of, I don't know what I would say, just sort of shock, I guess, would be a big part of it, is that they just, it blows them away, really, when they can taste it. And then they're always like, when can I get a different one? When do you change it? Well, how about tomorrow? You can come in tomorrow and get something new. So it's really fun, and we are humbled by these guys, the winemakers, because we knew right off the bat that if we were going to be in wine, it was not going to be growing it or making it. We are marketers, can't even keep a cactus alive. We're going to just sell it. But they work hard. They produce just amazing things. They take huge risks, I think, with what they try to do. And so we have just so much respect for that. And we really, really, really want the whole industry to continue to grow, because it just, the more it grows, the more great wines that we get. And we only have so many shelves, so it's going to constantly be rotating. We've represented about 40 wineries over the last 6 years. They come, they go. There's lots of different reasons for why they are here and why we have them and why we don't. But we feel like we have really be able to collect some of the best stuff out there. So
I mean,
I'm giving a big advertisement.
no,
Sorry.
that's
That's great.
awesome. I mean, to have representing 40 wineries in Arizona. I showed you that photo before. There's maybe 140 wineries in Arizona. You're basically covering a third at one given time. I think that's just, you're serving as an educator and kind of that shepherd. I love that word. You're guiding these folks who may not feel confident drinking a Mourvedre or drinking Fiano or even Sangiovese. These are varieties that are not in our vernacular, that aren't everyday, that you don't see in the supermarkets, that can be overwhelming. And I love the fact that your rotating flight list is so dynamic and so exciting for people like me that want to taste new things every day. I just think what you and Pete are doing is a fantastic venture and risky at all that, but it's great, and you have great success. Whenever I went to Jeanne and Pete's tasting room when I first moved here, and you had an in-house tasting, and you often do those.
We do. So we try as much as we can, probably about once a month, sometimes twice a month. We call them winery pop-ups, which just means the winery's here today, and they're going to bring in their favorite 3 or 4 wines, and you're going to be able to taste through them. We have one coming up on Sunday with Vino Stash, and so they've become extremely popular. Get there early. We don't take reservations because we don't want anyone to think they can't come. And we figure it out. Well, it may be standing room only, but what's wonderful about it is just the interest. The people are really trying to learn, and we get a lot of people coming to every single one of them, and then we have lots of new people. But we're really always trying to make wine fun. We do games, we do blind tastings. Next week we're going to have a Petite Syrah blind tasting, where our goal, it's called the Arizona Wine Challenge. We take an Arizona wine and we put it up against another wine from the United States and one from outside the United States. And so then you get all 3, and you have to try to figure out where they're from. And it really just makes people think about, what is a Petite Syrah supposed to taste like, and why would it be different in Arizona than other places? And so it's really just getting people to focus in on experimentation of wine and really expanding it, and then also putting it up against Arizona wine. So we try to make it an even playing field. We try to keep it similar price point, similar vintages, and not drastically different. And it's very fascinating to see kind of how it works out and how people make their choices and that kind of stuff. So we're just trying to keep it always interesting. So between the winery pop-ups and the challenges and the pairings, yeah, it's busy.
Yeah, I love that. I love surprising people. I mean, I think that's awesome to do a blind tasting with Petite Syrah just from all over. You know, I think that forces people to really consider the strength of Arizona wine. Is there a variety, like for me, I've been really impressed with some of the Southern Rhone varieties here, Grenache and Roussanne, particularly, and Syrah. Are there varieties that have also kind of impressed you? Maybe people can look out for if they see an Arizona wine? Or if they come into your wine bar, let's say?
Oh, that's such a big question. I mean, we believe that Arizona has some very unique grapes, and so that should be really what we focus on, or we really promote, just because we have Cab Sauv, and we have some really good Cab Sauv, but it just, to me, sort of feels like a Nike, you know? I mean, it's just everybody has it, everybody, you know, everybody knows what it is, and so, yeah, you're going to compare it to whatever you know, but everybody doesn't have a Graciano, doesn't have a Tannat. We actually did a private label with a Graciano and Tannat. We got 2 barrels of each and created, you know, our own private label with those, and sold out in a year.
That's awesome.
So we sell a lot of bottles of wine, and they were just phenomenally popular. And so that was, we called it Tenacity Tannat and Gratitude Graciano, and we released it right after we got through pandemic. So Gratitude and Tenacity. So that was what we did. But you know, those are the kind of grapes that I think that I encourage people to try, because it's very easy to say, okay, I know that one, Cab Sauv, I'm going to do that one. And it's, you know, why not try something that you haven't had before? And so that's what we encourage, and that's what I think our strength is in Arizona, is that we are so unique in that we have so many great different varietals, but we also have some phenomenal blends. So it's just sort of, it's infinite on how many different kind of flavors you're going to get because of that. So.
And unique blends, to add on to Jeanne's point. I remember first tasting a Page Springs Cellars wine. This was back in 2020. My brother lives here, which is why I moved here. And it had varieties from different countries together. There was Zinfandel and Picpoul and Roussanne. And it was just, I didn't really understand. I couldn't wrap my head around it, because I came from formal kind of classical wine training where French varieties go here and Spanish varieties go here. And this became this weird, odd connection of varieties, and I thought it was delicious, and I just couldn't believe that these varieties could go well together. And I was very skeptical. I'm a New Yorker. I'm very skeptical by nature. But getting on to some of the questions I wanted to pose. This is the business of heritage foods, right? So we're here to talk about business and economic impact and money. Sally brought up a really good point earlier. The cost of Arizona wine. I think this has been the elephant in the room for a while. This was what kind of hindered me, to be honest, to put Arizona wine by the glass at Tap and Bottle. I was worried. I was worried if I put a more expensive by the glass in a $10 glass, people wouldn't buy it. They wouldn't feel confident. They would feel like they're being taken advantage of, when you can go to the wine bar down the road and maybe get a $9 glass of Pinot Grigio. I thought about it, and I really reconsidered, because I want to push the envelope in this town. I'm really excited that Tucson City of Gastronomy has invited me for this. But the cost really has been the prohibitive factor in putting Arizona wine on the list. Do you ask any restaurant in town? They're too expensive. They're too expensive. I can't do it. People won't pay it. Will they? They might. They're pouring Arizona wine, Arizona beer. They're pouring Arizona bourbon, right? I see Del Bach here. There are other Arizona products being made here. This is not just a beer town anymore. This is not a bourbon town anymore. This is a wine town. So let's challenge it, right? So for me, some of the strategies I've had, I'm trying to find those wines that might come in at a $12 or $13 price point and then putting them on that list. And again, putting them in rotating flight lists like Jeanne does. So I'm going to kind of ask the whole panel. So Sally, to start off with you, because you work in restaurant and wine, and like you mentioned this with the cost, this is the elephant in the room. What kind of strategies do you have regarding this and how to face that challenge?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head. It's getting over ourselves and our own barriers. So, you know, our restaurant's expensive, and it's expensive because the proteins are sustainable, because almost all the produce is local and organic, because we're in a historic building that is not cheap. There's an overhead to what we do that, for better or worse, defines kind of how we have to use the space in my mind to bring something excellent to table. And yet I still had that in my head. I still had what Arielle said. I had my wines can't be too expensive by the glass. I think the best restaurant in town is Anello. So Anello's, as most of you know in the room, is a little pizzeria. They have 4 pizzas, they have 1 veg, they have 1 salad, and a focaccia. That's it. That's all you get there, and they usually have 4 wines. And I went there, and they had a Los Milix by the glass, and it was $18. And I'm not sure, don't quote me, but I think it was like a 5-ounce pour, and I was like, what is my problem? Like, why? I am here thoroughly enjoying myself, and they are bringing me something excellent to table that costs them, which costs me, and they're supporting a local winery. Why? What is my barrier? And so I just stopped worrying about it, and I started I've always put things on the menu that excite me, because I feel like my job is to bring something special to the public. My job isn't to make them comfortable with what they know. It's the way I look at it is that when someone comes into the Coronet and they want a glass of wine, they're still going to get a glass of wine. They just might not get an old friend. They're going to get something that's unique, maybe not unique, because nothing's really unique, but something maybe outside of their grocery store purchase or an old friend that they've had at their table before. But they're still going to have a glass of wine, and so I just stopped limiting myself, and I started expanding that price point to allow it to be there, and the reality is everyone's just buying it. I was my barrier, right? That's the reality of it. And so it's going to keep going that way. We're still, I don't know if the word's behind, but Phoenix and Scottsdale, we're in the same state. They have a totally different price point than we have in Tucson, and that expectation. We are up against it here, and we are going to be up against it for a long time, but it is what it is. I mean, it's why we don't have any good shoe stores here. I don't know. It's true,
I
though.
hear you.
So we have to drive farther.
Yeah.
But at some point, those of us who can will open the door on what we can.
Yeah. And I think Sally's point, paying $18 a glass at a little pizza joint, but people pay it.
Right. And I got 2 glasses, and again, I'm not even sure what the ounce was in it, because that's always a subjective thing, but it seemed like a little buddy. But it was delicious, right? It was delicious, and it went beautifully with the pizza, and that's what we're looking for, is that relationship.
Yeah. I think that mental block is difficult to overcome.
I think basically trying to over guess or over under, people can't buy what is not available to them, right? So you make everything available within the window of the picture you're creating, and everyone's going to do what they're going to do. I've got a really inexpensive Prosecco on the list, and I have a really beautiful wine bottle. It just moves, and people are going to do what they're going to do and use the property and the menus the way they're going to use them. But if I don't allow them to have that opportunity, it won't be there for them. And same with Tap and Bottle and Westbound. For me, I'm like, oh my God, they have whatever it is by the glass. I get really excited that I can go and hang out in these wonderful settings and get a great glass of Arizona wine. Mm-hmm. That's pretty exciting.
Yeah.
So thank you, both of you guys.
It's growing too. And Sarah, so Sarah's, in charge of the tasting room here in Tucson. how do you, I mean, some of your wines come in at I'll say a safer price point. I'm not going, I hate the word cheap. I'm trying to eliminate the word cheap from my vocabulary. But I serve your Malvasia Bianca by the glass at Westbound, and it's doing great. The aromatics and everything. And I can put that at a price point where, you know, maybe I'm not making the full margin on it. Maybe I'm losing $1. But you know what? Bottles are being sold. People are buying that wine by the glass. And for me, that's a win. So how do you navigate that in your own tasting room with wines, maybe flights or by the glass?
Sure. Yeah. So to touch back a little bit on what you were talking about, the cost, the pat answer that we've received for many years, I mean, since we were pitching our first wines in 2011, was it's too expensive. Like, even really before people got to taste the wines. And that's why we had success in Phoenix first. We were able to get our wines on lists in Phoenix before we were able to do it here in Tucson. And that really did start to shift around 2015 and what was the onus for us opening here. On production side, we, you know, like I said before, 2,000 cases annually is pretty darn small in the scheme of wine production. So we, you know, our costs are just greater. We can't scale up and buy 1,000 bottles. We can't, I mean, 1,000,000 bottles at once. You know, we have to buy per lot, and that means, and because, you know, cash flow is always, anybody who owns a business, cash flow is always, you know, something that you're looking at. You were buying, you know, lot to lot for every bottling. So we're shipping more, you know, we're not able to, our cost per bottle is much higher than the Justin wine that you're seeing on the shelves in the grocery store, just for packaging, solely packaging alone. So these sorts of things, as we have grown, you know, we started with, you know, the first 2 years we made 400 cases of wine just off of our small estate vineyard. Now that we are at 2,000, we're able to allocate big chunks of the production to those wines that we do sell through our distributor, which is the Malvasia. We have a Tempranillo-based red, and then our rosé is Grenache. Because we have access to bigger volumes of fruit. So there is immense pressure for us to continue to lower our prices, to continue to offer wines at value instead of cheap. We'll say at value, so we can be on wine lists, because we do know that people, if they can taste it, then they're more likely to buy a bottle next time they see it on a shelf. So if we can be somewhere by the glass, we know that will serve us down the line. So it is almost kind of a marketing expense in that way, is that it allows folks on wine lists in Phoenix to be able to purchase the wines by the glass, give it a taste, and hopefully, you know, fingers crossed, next time they're in AJ's or Whole Foods, they'll pick it up. But it's very difficult. That dance is constant, and there's constant pressure for us to reduce our prices, but we actually cannot. So in the tasting room, it gives folks the opportunity, and also we also see it as marketing for, hopefully people will actually pick up the bottle, look at our website, and then come see us in Tucson while they're traveling, or if they're Tucsonans, come see us here, where they can taste everything. So we're hoping that we're giving an incredible snapshot of the possibility of Arizona wine, and San Reckoner in particular, with those value wines. But we aren't making a ton of money when we sell those. But the idea is that then people will come and see us, and then they'll, having loved the Malvasia, will be open to trying the Vermentino. We'll be open to trying our Fiano and Carmenere, you know, these incredible wines that we can make.
Yeah. Jeanne, same question to you. I mean, I think you touched on it in terms of your rotating by the glass list and your flight lists. I mean, are those some of the strategies you've held for the past, let's say, 7 years?
We have. I mean, from the get-go, we did not want to compete with Arizona wineries. We think the Arizona wineries have to have a strong business in their tasting rooms, if they have tasting rooms. Some of them don't. But we don't want to compete with them, so we were never going to undercharge what they're offering their wines for. However, we are buying at a wholesale price, so we have to have some margins in order to run a business. So our bottles are usually a few dollars more than what you would get it at the winery, which most people are like, oh, that's great, because at the restaurant it's 4 times what the wholesale is. So, you know, what we're selling it for is really very accessible, and that's really our goal, is to make it accessible, the pricing. I think one of the uniquenesses that we have is that it's all Arizona wine, so the price of the glasses are in line with the price of the bottles. I'm not trying to price my Arizona glasses against my California or something else that I could get, you know, much cheaper wholesale for. So, you know, we're all in. So we're really only comparing Arizona pricing to Arizona pricing. And the reality is if you go to any winery in California and you're getting their tasting room wine, Arizona wines are not too expensive. The price of them are not too expensive. As a matter of fact, they're probably underpriced for the quality of what they are. So in the context of our tasting room, people are used to tasting rooms and they're getting it directly from the wineries. The distributed wines have a tendency to be higher production, maybe not the best wines that a winery makes, right? They keep that for their tasting room. So my point is that it's really not that expensive. It's, to Sally's point, as small business owners, we make choices. There's no specific formula that we have to follow as smallest business. We make choices on how we want our business to run and where we can make money. So we don't have a specific formula. If I get it for this, I have to sell it for this. But we do know what we need to make to stay open. And that's really how we price our stuff. But I mean, you can look at our bottle list and, you know, most of our wines are under $40, that's for sure, bottles. And I think our average is right around 35. So, and we sell a lot of bottles. If you're a winery and you're in our place, if you get on that tasting list, you know, that particular day or part of a week, we will probably sell through the 3 or 4 cases that we got from you, and then we'll reorder it again. So we're about selling the wine. That's what our whole goal is to sell it. And the pricing does not seem to be a huge obstacle in our context. So I think it's just, it all changes depending on where you're at. If you're comparing it to the price of the beer, well, you know, we only have 4 beers, so.
And you know, Tap and Bottle is not just wine. We have beer as well. Beer prices have gone up. Everything is going up. Eggs are $9 a dozen, right? In the grand scheme of what you were saying, I tasted some wine wholesale pricing yesterday that I wasn't very impressed with in California, and it was $30 wholesale. I mean, I really didn't care for it. I didn't think it quantified that price.
Right, we look at the price in relationship to the fact that there's a struggle in Arizona, not about the wine. And that's the reality. It is underpriced when you look at it in another lens.
In that context,
yeah. For sure.
Now, I really want to wrap up, but I want Sarah to kind of finish this last question, because Sarah is closest to the grapes in the vineyards. The City of Gastronomy is putting this on. Tucson is one of the only UNESCO cities in the United States that holds this designation. Really proud to be kind of a little part into that. Sarah, why do you feel that Arizona wine contributes to this designation?
Yeah, well, physically, my understanding, the food shed, which is what gives the designation, is an 80-mile radius around the city of Tucson. Sonoyta definitely falls into it. Wilcox pretty much does. So we're here, we're doing it, and grapes were brought in and have been grown here for hundreds of years by the missionaries. We for I'm struggling to farming is so hard. And grape growing in particular is really it is easier in certain aspects in that it's not an annual crop. But we put the vines in the ground, and 3 years later we start to reap our harvests. And so you have to be really, really fully invested into doing it. And we have some of the most passionate growers that we work with, and it is truly incredible. San Reckoner, we don't farm anymore, but it is soul breaking and making work. It's truly
It's the struggle.
amazing. It's the struggle. It is so hard, and Arizona presents its own set of challenges that Sally touched on a little bit. It's a true struggle, and wine in particular, there's some magical interplay when grapes are grown in a place and they take in the soils, the weather, the culture around them, be it plant or human, and are harvested, vinified. There's nothing else that can quite express place like wine can. It's magic, the way that they transform what they have seen in that year into this delicious beverage. And so to have, and then that's why I think, City of Gastronomy it's about place. We live in this incredible place, and have this history of food growing, native food growing, and the centuries of cultivation of these beautiful crops. And so how I think alongside the wheats and this, all of the things that are native to here and have been cultivated, that you can have a beverage that can give a snapshot of place of Southern Arizona is phenomenal. So that's how I think and I hope that we contribute to the designation.
So, a little anecdote. I attended the Tucson Hop Shop tasting where you launched your Balvazia pet nat. And it was either you or Crystal who said, this smells like creosote. And we were coming up with the tasting terms for it. The next day, I took a walk and it was raining. And I could not stop smelling that Malvasia in my face walking in the desert. And like you said, that terroir is so intrinsically linked to wine. And it's really a magical connection that we have with nature. And I'm glad that the Tucson City of Gastronomy is including wine in this designation. I think it really stands for the people behind it, the culture, like you were saying, and all of that. Looking ahead, I must note, these are the Rumline vineyards where Sarah from San Reckoner is sourcing their fruit. These are just netting for birds, I believe.
Yeah.
Birds are a pain, coyotes are a pain here in the desert, but it's just such a beautiful landscape, so I wanted to make note of that. Looking to the future, I mentioned a lot of this during the introduction. There's a lot of increased tourism initiatives for wine. Yay! People coming here and wanting to taste wine, not just go golfing, but making wine the destination. There's a heightened interest in locally produced products. We sell so much Del Bock. We sell so much Ray Ray's Sonoran iced tea. We sell a lot of agave spirits. We are selling more Arizona wine than when I first started 2 years ago. I don't think that's a coincidence. I think that's the strength of the industry. The one thing I wanted to touch on too, there's viticulture schools right in Arizona. The Southwest Wine Center is located in Clarkdale. They offer enology and viticulture programs led by Michael Pierce, a winemaker for Bodega Pierce, and Seculum Cellars. You could take online courses. You could learn about enology on your own through the Southwest Wine Center, which is a part of Yavapai Community College. There are more winemakers now. I'm willing to bet that it's going to keep growing. Scale, of course, is limited here in Arizona because of land, but I think that the interest is going to keep growing for Arizona wine. Next up, woohoo! Big announcement. So I will be moderating another panel. This is going to take place on February 3rd. This is part of the Arizona Wine Growers Association. This is the first time they're doing this kind of a tasting. We're comparing it to the Hospice de Rhône, which was a grand wine tasting in France in the Rhône Valley, where you had comparative tastings of certain varieties. So on February 3rd from 2 o'clock to 4 o'clock at Tohono Chul, they have graciously donated the space to us for this event. I will be hosting this wine tasting with 10 different Arizona wines in a comparative seated tasting and seminar. And the winemakers, the majority will be present for this tasting. It's a really unique opportunity to actually taste some of the wine. It's a little early. I tried to kind of finagle something to be poured today, but it is a little early. But this is a great opportunity to taste and to learn more about Arizona. Thank you. Thank you to Erica at Forge for having this great idea and meeting me for a glass of wine at Tap and Bottle a few months ago. It was right around Hanukkah, I remember, and we were making matzo ball soup, I think, so we were talking about that. In any case, thank you, Erica, for trusting me to put this together. Jonathan, thank you so much. For Tucson City of Gastronomy for having us here today. A lot of the resources I have here were from the AWGA, the Economic Impact Report that they put together, and some of the data I took from the viticulture school. And thank you all for coming. It's 9 o'clock in the morning, so we're down 10, so thank you so much. Yeah, thank you.
Who thinks it's not necessarily too early to
I know.
Thanks everybody for coming. Thank you, panelists. Really, that was a great discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Yes, thank you again. Give another giant hand.
Yay!